years old.
He's been doing this since he was 9.
Camera. And then at the bottom there should be a slider.
I was not born into my mother's arms. There was no warmth holding me, no eyes looking at me for the first time. I was born in sand, nothing more, nothing less. A fragile shell cracked open in the darkness beneath the earth. The first thing I saw was not the sun, but the suffocating collapse of broken sand, grains pouring into my eyes, my nose, my mouth, as if the world welcomed me not with tenderness, but with a test. I had to climb up on my own. No teacher, no guiding hand, no help, only an instinct whispering that if I didn't rise, light would never reach me. I pushed through the sand with trembling feet. Sand fell on my head, onto my back, burying me again and again, more times than I surfaced. But I kept going, not out of bravery, but because sea turtles are not given a second option, nothing beneath the surface will come rescue us. When the last layer of sand broke open, a sliver of light appeared above me. I saw the sky, for the very first time, so vast that I felt like nothing more than a grain of sand that hadn't yet learned how to belong to the world. Sea air filled my chest, salty, dry, full of a life I didn't yet understand. In front of me was the ocean. Behind me was the beach, where death waited. Between them was me, a creature who had barely escaped the dark. My siblings had already crawled out. They moved toward the sea like they were born knowing the way. No one looked back. No one waited. No one was allowed to wait. Because on the sand, every second still is a chance for something in the sky, or something crawling in the shadows, to choose us as their first meal. I started to crawl, slowly, so slowly, but each inch carried a truth only sea turtles truly understand. Every step on the sand is a battle. The wind pushed me off course. Bird tracks circled around me like invisible traps. Night was approaching, and all I had were my tiny feet, and a fragile instinct pushing me forward. I wasn't afraid of the ocean. I was afraid of never reaching it. I crawled on, under a dimming sky, and the ocean still felt far away. But I kept going, because somewhere ahead was the first thing my life depended on. Water. Water to hide in. Water to breathe in. Water to live in. Water to turn me from a trembling hatchling into a true sea turtle. When the first wave touched my feet, something strange passed through me, a feeling like coming home, even though I had never been there. I looked out at the dark vastness of the sea. I didn't know what waited. I didn't know what the future was. I didn't even know if I would survive the night. I only knew one thing. This was the moment every sea turtle in history has faced. The moment between life and death, between sand and sea, between fear and instinct. And I stepped into the water. Not because I was strong, but because every sea turtle is born carrying a story that must continue until it can't anymore. The water wrapped around me the moment I slipped beneath it, not like a mother holding her child, not warm, not gentle, just a cold, vast, endless embrace. But I wasn't afraid. Compared to the burning sand and the predators waiting in the dark, the ocean was the only place that gave me a chance. Even if that chance was paper thin, I swam, not fast, not well. My tiny flippers paddled like two fragile leaves, trying to push back the whole world. Around me, other hatchlings swam too. We weren't a flock. There was no leader, no protector. No one to stay behind for anyone else. In the ocean, every creature must choose its own way to survive, and the first harsh truth I learned was, not all who emerge from the nest make it to deep water. Not because they're weak, not because they're slow, but because the ocean is always hungry. I heard a rush beneath me, a shadow slice through the blue. A snapper, fast, powerful, silent. A hatchling right beside me vanished in a single bite. No scream, no splash, no trace, only a fading swirl in the water. I held my breath for half a heartbeat, but I couldn't stop. If I froze, my small body would become nothing more than an easier shadow to swallow. I kicked harder. My heart raced faster. The fear didn't come from the predator, but from not knowing when it would be my turn. As I swam farther from shore, the ocean grew beautiful. Light filtered through the surface, shimmering like dreams for creatures who had never seen the sky. Soft algae, tiny corals, clouds of glittering fish drifted past like living stars. I wanted to stare, to let myself believe this world was meant for me, to hope, but the ocean doesn't allow long dreams. Beauty always travels with death. A school of mackerel shot past, moving in a formation sharp as blades. They weren't hunting turtles, but their speed alone could kill anything drifting in the wrong place. I dodged, just in time. Another hatchling didn't. It spun helplessly in the current, then sank like a leaf caught by the wind. No one stopped. No one looked back. No one mourned. In the ocean, death is simply part of the swim. By nightfall, I was exhausted. I drifted with the current, eyes barely open. Above me, the moon reflected on the waves, like a giant eye staring straight at me. I heard distant, ghostly sounds, the song of whales, waves crashing against rocks, wind slicing over open water. All of it vast, powerful, unreachable, and me, just a tiny body floating in a world that didn't even know I existed. But I survived. I survived the first day, a day most hatchlings never see the end of. I didn't know what the future held, only that the ocean was too big and I was too small. But no matter how small I was still drifting, still swimming, still alive. And that is all a sea turtle can do in the first few fragile days of its life. I thought that once I grew bigger, stronger, better at swimming, the ocean would become easier. But I was wrong. The greatest enemy of my life has no teeth, no fins, no eyes, no instinct to hunt. The greatest enemy I have is a thing that does not belong to the sea. In my early months, I lived near the surface. There was plenty of light, plenty of food, and plenty of predators. I learned to dodge razor-sharp mackerel, shooting snapper, and stingrays gliding like shadows along the sand. I thought I understood how to survive, until I met the first thing that made my heart tighten, because I didn't understand what it was. A transparent plastic bag drifting just below the surface. Light, scentless, silent. It looked exactly like a jellyfish, my food. It floated, pulsing softly in the current. I swam closer. Instinct told me it was a meal, but something was wrong, very wrong. I touched it. It wasn't soft like a jellyfish. Not cool. It clung. It was cold, and it wasn't alive. I recoiled instantly. Another young turtle wasn't as lucky. It bit the bag, swallowed part of it, and began to thrash. Its body tightened. It couldn't make a sound. Sea turtles do not have a cry for danger, only flippers beating weaker and weaker. The plastic didn't kill it immediately, but I knew it wouldn't live long. That was the first time I understood the ocean now held deaths that had no shape of predators. In my second year, I met the second enemy, fishing nets. Nets are nothing like sharks. They don't charge, don't bite, don't cast shadows. They just lie there, invisible. A human trap dropped into the ocean, like a declaration that the sea no longer belongs only to the creatures in it. I swam into a dark patch of water, and my front flipper snagged on a strand of thin line. No pain, just stuck. I kicked hard. The line tightened. I twisted. It coiled tighter. In seconds, I understood why so many sea turtles die in silence. Not because nets kill us, but because nets don't let us breathe. I kicked with everything I had. My chest burned. My throat tightened. My lungs felt ready to burst. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of suffocating. The quietest kind of death. I twisted again. This time, the line slipped free. I escaped. I lived. But I knew many others would never get that one lucky turn. In my 3rd year, I met something that chilled me more than any shark. An oil slick. It stretched across the surface. Black, thick, heavy. When I surfaced to breathe, a film clung to my nostrils. Scentless, just hot, sticky, suffocating. I dove by reflex. But the oil sank with me. Not a predator. No bait. Not a single piece of trash. This was something that killed an entire ocean. Something the sea had no way to heal. I managed to escape by swimming deep under the slick, but the film clung to my shell for hours after. I trembled, not from cold, but from realization. The ocean is big enough to feed billions of creatures, but not big enough to escape the reach of humans. That night, I rested on the seabed, listening to waves crash against distant rocks. I understood then that our enemies do not only come from nature, they come from another world. A world that doesn't live underwater, yet holds the power to change the fate of the sea. I looked up at the dark surface, and for the first time in my life, I feared things I had never even seen. I survived the first 3 years of my life. 3 years that most sea turtles never make it through. I swam faster, stronger, dove deeper. I learned to find safe waters, to avoid schools of predators, to read currents like an old familiar book. I thought that once I grew up, the ocean would respect me a little more. But the ocean doesn't care how old you are, doesn't care how strong or weak you are, doesn't care how many times you've escaped death. The ocean teaches only one lesson. Survival has no intermission. I grew big enough to travel farther than ever before. I swam past coral reefs glowing like galaxies beneath the waves. I swam through dark waters where whales sang songs of ancient ghosts. I swam through cold currents that squeezed my heart with fear. I explored. I wandered. I lived. But the bigger I grew, the clearer I saw the shadows I was too young to understand before. One day, I saw a massive shape drifting across the surface. Not a shark, not a whale, not any creature at all. It was a ship, a giant, black thing, heavy, slow, floating like a breathing rock. It had no eyes, but I felt its presence, like a monster consuming the ocean, not with teeth, but with oil, with noise, with nets, with lights that confuse every creature's path. I dove deeper, because the older turtles once told me, stay away from that monster. It doesn't know how to avoid you. As I sank, I heard the metal echo through the water, thick and heavy, not the sound of life, a distant warning of death. I escaped the ship, but not everything. The year I reached adulthood, I met the thing every sea turtle knows will come, but never knows when. Plastic wrapped around the neck, a thin strand, fragile, not frightening, yet stubborn as fate. I didn't know where it came from. Maybe the land, maybe a boat, maybe from a human who just wanted to throw something away quickly. But that something was tightening around my throat. I tried to scrape it off with my flipper. It dug in deeper. I twisted my body. It looped around again. I started losing breath, not from the deep, but from a strand thinner than human guilt. I struggled until I had nothing left. Finally, I rubbed myself against a jagged reef until the strand wore thin and snapped. I escaped, but my neck burned, red and raw, a wound I knew would scar me for life. It was the mark of humans, a mark that never fades. That night, I lay on the seafloor, looking at the sky through the water. The stars blurred with the waves. They didn't look as beautiful as they did when I was young, because now I understood no creature truly grows up in the ocean. There are only those who have survived, until the day they can't anymore. Sea turtles are not born to be strong. We are born to keep living, even as the ocean leaves less and less room for that to happen.
Bolt cutter-like power that would easily snip off the edge of your finger. So when I jumped into the water, the first thing I was thinking was,
Coyote.
yeah, I'm gonna need some help. This turtle is so unbelievably strong. It just wants to spin. We want to keep...
Sea turtles do not live near the shore, do not live near the sand, do not live near the place where we were born. But one day, a strange calling pulled me back to the place where everything began. No one told me. No one guided me. No one taught me. Instinct did it all. It was the call of the life cycle, the call every grown turtle must hear. I returned to the beach I had crawled out of 2 decades earlier. The sand was hot beneath my belly, yet familiar. The wind blew from the sea, and I knew it well. The sunset bled red across the horizon like an old wound. Everything seemed as it was in the memory I barely remembered. But I was wrong. Not everything. Only I remained the same. The beach did not. When night fell, I crawled ashore. Slow, heavy, tired. But this was a journey I was meant to take. I began to dig, digging with all 4 flippers, digging with a heart that remembered everything I had survived, digging with the instinct of thousands of generations before me. I believed the sand would be gentle to my children, the way it had once been gentle to me. But then, I saw it. Lights. White, blue, yellow streaks. Not belonging to the stars, not belonging to the moon. Electric lights. Lights humans had built across the shoreline. House lights. Street lights. The glowing fronts of new resorts. Light has no sound, no scent, no shape, but it is stronger than any predator, because it confuses the very instinct sea turtles depend on. My children, still only soft eggs beneath the sand, will hatch and crawl toward the brightest light. When I was born, the brightest light was the moon over the ocean, and so I crawled to the right place. But now, the brightest lights are inland, not the sea, not life, but the place where my children will crawl into. Asphalt, car tires, walls, drainage pipes. I looked at the long line of artificial light, a blade slicing through my memories, and I understood. Maybe I survived, but the next generation might not. I stood still for a long time. The sand cooled. The water at the edge kissed my flippers, but all I heard was the wind breathing through human-made lanterns. I dug the nest, laid the eggs, covered them, not knowing if they had a chance, not knowing where the artificial light would lead them, not knowing if they would slide across the sand as I once did. I only knew one thing. I had done my part. The rest no longer belonged to the ocean. It belonged to humans. I swam back into the sea in silence. The water wrapped around me like it once did, but this time, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy with grief. I do not fear sharks. I do not fear big fish. I do not fear anything the ocean creates. I fear only one thing. A thing with no legs, no teeth, no shadow. Human light. A beautiful thing, yet powerful enough to kill an entire generation before it ever begins to live. I had grown up. I had survived the things that almost killed me when I was small. I had passed through storms, through dark waters, through places where the ocean breathed in harsh, gravelly waves. I thought I had grown too large to be caught by small traps. But on that day, I understood. Humans do not only make small traps, they build enormous machines of death. I was swimming near a deep water zone when I heard a strange vibration moving through the water. Not like a whale's song, not like rocks falling, not like waves hitting the cliffs. This vibration was steady, heavy, deliberate, like a metal heart beating on the ocean floor. I looked up. The surface in the distance darkened under a massive shadow. Not a shark, not a predator, an industrial fishing vessel. This thing does not hunt one creature. It hunts entire schools, entire waters, entire lifespans of the sea. I dove deeper to avoid it, but I didn't know the most dangerous part was not above me. As I descended, I saw it. A wall stretching endlessly, drifting through the water like a curtain of death. A bottom travel net, a nightmare made of ropes, an invisible hand sweeping every living thing in its path. Small fish, large fish, turtles, octopuses, coral, even rocks and sand. Nothing escapes. Nothing is spared. I shifted left. The net shifted left. I swam right. The net swung right. This thing does not hunt with speed. It hunts with area. It doesn't need intelligence. It only needs to sweep through a piece of ocean, and everything inside it is dragged away like fallen leaves. I dove even deeper, but then a strange current tugged at me. Not painful, not sudden, not violent. Slow, deliberate. As if death wanted me to understand there was no other option. I kicked with all my strength. Every stroke burned through my chest. I heard my heartbeat pounding into the water. I didn't want to die like this. Not like this. Not inside a net, with no face, no eyes, no soul. I kicked harder, harder. A rope looped around my front flipper. I twisted. It looped again. I felt the familiar despair I had once known as a hatchling, when a piece of trash had tightened around my neck. But this time, it was bigger, stronger, heavier, and it would not break like a piece of garbage. I pushed with everything I had, rubbing the net against a nearby rock. The net was harder than the rock, but its knots were weaker than its ropes. I twisted again. The net cut into my skin, burning deep. I couldn't breathe, not from lack of air, but from a fear greater than any predator I had ever faced. I thrashed one last time. Crack. A knot snapped. I slipped free of the death wall and dropped toward the sea floor. Not because I wanted to die, because I had no strength left. I lay there, gasping, my chest feeling like it was being sliced open with every breath. Above me, the trawl net drifted by, dark, endless, silent, dragging away hundreds of innocent creatures. And I understood. The ocean is no longer threatened by hunters. It is threatened by beings who do not live here. When I finally rose and swam slowly towards safer waters, I knew I had survived again. But a new fear remained. One day, the ocean will have no place left to hide, no rocks to scrape a net off, no currents to escape through, no safe waters to retreat to. And when that day comes, sea turtles like me will not die from nature. We will die from the things humans lower into the ocean, not once, but every single day. I once believed that sea turtles grew stronger with age, but the truth is the opposite. Growing old does not make me wiser than the ocean. Growing old only makes me slower than the ocean. And being slow is a crime in the sea. I began to feel the first changes. The strokes that once cut through water like paddles grew softer. I could no longer dive as quickly. It took me longer to reach the surface for air. Each time I rose above the waves, the sky looked as wide as the day I was born, but now I understood that a sky that wide can be as frightening as the deepest trench. Because each time I surfaced, I didn't know if tomorrow I would still have enough strength to rise again. One day, while swimming through a still patch of water, I heard a deep, distant boom from the seafloor. Not a whale's call, not rocks collapsing, but the pulse of a massive engine. I dove instinctively, but slower than before. The dark shadow of a ship glided overhead. It didn't hit me, but the force of its propellers sent me drifting sideways. I twisted my body slowly, and a painful jolt shot down my spine. I knew then that aging wasn't just something I felt in my mind, but something etched into my bones. When I was young, I could dodge. Now, all I could do was endure. In the days that followed, I stayed near the surface more often, not because I loved the light, but because I no longer had the strength for long dives. But staying near the surface meant confronting the things I once avoided easily. Plastic bags, torn nets, drifting planks, bottles, foam fragments. Each object lifeless, yet drifting as if seeking a victim of its own. I tired faster. I breathed harder. I needed to rest more. The ocean, once my home, had become a place that constantly pushed me to my limits. Then one day, I encountered the thing I feared most. Not sharks, not nets, not debris. Hunger. My body was no longer fast enough to catch prey. There was less algae. Many feeding grounds had been destroyed by humans, and jellyfish, the food that sustained me, were now tainted with plastic, poisoned by chemicals, their bodies more trash than nourishment. I had grown up in a world where food was still plentiful, but now, in my old age, the ocean had nothing spare to give. I had to swim farther to find food, swim longer, dive deeper. That is the cruel paradox of sea turtles. The older we get, the more food we need, yet the less strength we have to find it. One afternoon, as I struggled to chase a jellyfish, I felt something inside me give way. Not pain, not exhaustion, just release. I stopped, suspended in the deep blue, watching the sun burn red across the surface, like a wound bleeding into the sea. I understood then. Old age does not kill sea turtles with a single blow. It kills by taking pieces away, one by one. Strength, breath, speed, the ability to dive deep, and finally, the ability to exist. I will not die from predators. I will not die from nets. I will not die from plastic. I will die because my body can no longer swim fast enough to meet its own needs. But I am still here. I am still swimming, slower, weaker, but alive. And I know this. Not every sea turtle dies young. Some live long enough to watch the world change, the ocean change, the lights, the noise, even the future change. And the ones who live the longest are also the ones who see the most sorrow. Old age slowed me down, but it was that very slowness that brought me to a place no sea turtle should ever be, the shallow waters near shore. I didn't choose to go there. The seasonal winds pushed the currents too strongly, and my tired body could no longer fight against them. The water grew shallower. The sea floor rose beneath me in patches of light and shadow, and I began to hear a sound I had never heard in the deeper parts of the ocean. Laughter, engines, footsteps, the sound of humans. I wanted to dive immediately, but my chest burned. My breath stuttered. I couldn't sink. I lay there too close to the surface, too close to the shore, too close to a world that was never meant for me, and that was the final mistake of my life. When humans spotted me, they surrounded me as if they had found a treasure. They didn't know I was too exhausted to swim away. They didn't know I had survived for decades, only to wash up here at the end of my life. They didn't know I just needed a little space to catch my breath. They stepped into the water, bringing lights, shouts, and bright devices in their hands. Not weapons, cameras, phones. And in that moment, I understood something. The ocean had never taught me. Humans can kill you simply because they want to get closer. I was touched, pushed, turned. My flippers were lifted so they could take pictures. It didn't hurt, but my body was so weak that every touch knocked me off balance. I felt the sand beneath my belly being kicked up. I could no longer hold my breath for long. I tried to retreat into deeper water, but each time I pushed myself forward, someone stepped into my path. They were not cruel. They were simply curious, but their curiosity was something my body could no longer survive. I rose to breathe, but the surface was no longer mine. It was blocked by the silhouettes of humans standing too close. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. I tried to turn away, but my flippers were stuck in the too shallow water. Each passing second drained me a little more. I realized I would not die in a fishing net. I would not die in a shark's mouth. I would not die from pollution. I would not die from hunger. I would die near the shore, the place that should have been the safest, yet the one place where I had no escape. I would die because I was surrounded by creatures so curious. They forgot I needed air. I tried to rise one last time. A half breath. Not enough. I looked at the sky stretched over the surface. I heard the waves hitting the legs of the people standing beside me. I felt the water beneath my belly grow colder, even though it wasn't deep. I thought of where I was born, the dark sand, the first wave that carried me into life, and I understood that not all beings die where they wish to die. I closed my eyes. The ocean held me one final time, but not to keep me, to carry me away. No scream, no pain, just one unfinished breath, and an old heart stopping beneath the shadows of humans who didn't know what they had just done. A Saiya turtle's death makes no sound. There is no violent struggle, no streaks of blood spreading through the water like other creatures. Our death comes from the absence of a breath, just that. One final breath that isn't full enough. And I left the world. When my body sank, it didn't fall fast. I drifted, suspended between warm and cold layers of water, as if lying in the ocean's own hammock. I no longer felt anything, but the sea did. I could no longer see the light, but the sea still watched. The sea always watches the creatures who die in silence. In the depths, a gentle current carried me away, not to bury me, but to place me among the nameless graveyards of the lives that once swam here. A place with no graves, no names, no markers. Only one thing remains, the story. My story, and the stories of countless sea turtles, and all the beings living in an ocean reshaped by human hands. Humans think sea turtles die because of nature, but no, we die because of the lights that mislead hatchlings, trash that clings to our necks, plastic that masquerades as jellyfish, trawling nets that sweep entire worlds clean, ships so large we cannot reach the surface in time, and curious hands that block the last path we need to survive. My death did not come from the ocean. It came from things the ocean never created. Above the surface, waves still touched the shore like every day. Children still played. Adults still laughed. They didn't know that right beneath their feet, a life had just ended. No one knew. No one heard. No one saw. Only the sea did. and the sea remembered by holding my body and retelling my story through every pulse of its waves. The next day, the beach still shined, the moon still rose, baby turtles still hatched, and they would crawl toward the wrong light created by humans. Some would reach the sea, some would not, and among those who make it, there may be one who lives as long as I did, swims as far as I once swam, grows tired as I once grew tired, and faces the world as I once faced it. And someday, it too will grow old, grow weak, and wash ashore as I did. That is the cycle. That is the rule. That is what sea turtles cannot change, but humans can. If they choose to, the sea will not cry for my death. The sea will simply remember by holding my story in its waves. Remember so that when someone is ready to listen, the sea can whisper it all again. I died in silence, but the sea will carry my story, and it will never let it disappear